Usually when I write, I'm also fasting because because I'm some kind of Neoplatonist. And I believe I don't remember which one it said. I know Plato said fasting was healthy. Um, and I just kind of dogmatically decide to believe that for the sake of its self-grounding. Um, but it's not edifying at all if it or grounding at all. Um, and I think that's also why it's such a great thing because when you fast, well, you just kind of suffer when you are hungry. You get those moments and you're like, "Oh, I'm just hungry and I can't focus." But actually, I've been practicing fasting. I do it every week. I fast for a few days for like 24 hours, so I have like one meal a day, right? And then it really helps me to read and write. It's funny because it doesn't help me to be social at all. Actually, I can get pretty hangry or grumpy because of fasting. I don't usually I don't really desire to talk to people when I'm in a certain period of my fasting. But yeah, no, with writing and reading it works tremendously. And it's kind of strange actually, like what is the thing about you're hurting yourself, your stomach, and then the way I perceive it is like you kind of start getting more of a tunnel vision into the very thing that you're doing, and then it's just like you bring out the drive, you bring out the drive, and I'm very much interested in the drive. Just today I was reading some Zizek, and he was saying that actually things like jouissance, the drive, the object A, these weren't really thought by Hegel, and I think he really nailed it on the head right there because recently, as I've said in some net conversations too, I've been interested in what are the psychological presuppositions of the science of logic, in especially present not in mediating purely metaphysical categories like quantity, quality, essence, some those things, but like before that, why would you even go into mediating those categories dialectically? And then so Hegel says that um, it is the loftier business of logic to raise spirit to truth and freedom. So Hegel basically believes that, in let's call it like in normal daily life, we're in a continuous conditioning of subject and object. We have like, for example, me and my cigarettes. That's a pathetic example, but food, dealing with all these kinds of mundane things, sensuous. But we're in immediate unity, like oftentimes I smoke a cigarette and then when it's like almost over, I'm like, damn, like I didn't even notice that I was smoking it. And yeah, if it's a good day, I won't light up a second one. But the thing is, like, these things are super transitory, and obviously we cannot find any edification there, even though we kind of believe it. But then, we do the thing, then we look back on it, and we're like, oh damn, that like trying to fill up emptiness. That thing that I thought was gonna fill up some emptiness actually was empty in itself. Um, but we can actually go beyond this for Hegel, and it's really like only in love that we can go truly beyond this. But it starts in a sense, love is the most supreme actualization of liberation, of spiritual liberation as such. That's the case for Hegel, at least. Um, of course, this is not liberation conceptualized in a way that you're just getting rid of all kinds of ways of being confined or all kinds of external determinations. No, it's something else. It's a concrete freedom that works with um, being in actuality. My point, though, is that for Hegel, freedom starts somewhere, and it starts at withdrawal. For Hegel, it starts when you move away from instinct, when you move away from having to sense something. And most of us all the time we have to sense something. We actually kind of hate to think. Well, we have another way to kind of avoid to think, but kind of pretend to think, and this is what Hegel calls representation. And the representations aren't really bad as such. For example, like take the Christian religion for Hegel. There's this notion of like the immortality of the soul, the Holy Spirit, the Father and the Son, and these are all for Hegel representations. And he says that these are actually they contain truth, but from within religion you cannot comprehend this truth. You can represent you can represent it, and there's definitely something to that, but you cannot think them truly. So what does it mean to truly think? I like this thing that Heidegger once said, that to think is actually to take notice of the fact that you're not thinking. And that's there's something to that for sure. But there's also like, is okay, in a sense Hegel is quite Neoplatonist or Platonic, even in the sense in this idea of like what is his psychological presupposition for the science of logic, because he wants to purify spirit and raise it to truth and freedom, right? So we move away from the senses, we move away from an attachment to external, sensuous, material, degenerative, transitory reality. Well, is that really possible? First of all, second of all, what about like relapsing into the conditioning of subject and object? Isn't that always going to happen? And when you read Hegel in his paper on love, he does say that, yes, you can be liberated in love, but then again, let's say that you find your life partner, then you still have to deal with all kinds of external external necessities. The thing is, though, like Hegel, he does talk about the drive. He also talks about enjoyment, which is interesting in and of itself. Let me just see. I wrote this down somewhere. So yeah, for Hegel, he has this quote that he says that spirit enjoys the absolute idea. And it seems like kind of spirit is kind of getting a circular enjoyment out of this. I kind of brought this out in a certain way in my latest article. The way drive is conceptualized by psychoanalysis is very interesting. One of the ways it is that those old LP players where you have like a needle and then you put it on the plate and then it spins around? Well, Zizek says that the drive is basically when you get like a scratch on the LP player and then you just continuously hear the repetition of that same half a second of music. Like to me, like when I for example wrote my recent article and I was fasting and stuff like this, I mean, what I'm doing there is like I'm trying to be with that drive and let it all come out. And the thing is, though, that with this, to let it come out and to let the other speak through me and let things come, I first have to self-empty. In other words, I would say that what is this self-emptying exactly? It's not so sacred as it sounds. It's just like, the way I read it is just like submission to transference. So in other words, the way Hegel describes thinking is that you do not bring external things arbitrarily or spontaneously. You let thinking run its own course. So your job, to put it in this way, when you try to think, is not actually to actively come up with all kinds of things. That's not thinking for Hegel. That's not thinking. That's bringing in all kinds of abstract representations, images, these kinds of things. Thinking is actually a process whereby you have to submit your body to the drive, which is the other speaking through you. Now, of course, when you're reading something, you have to actively read, always make notes, underline things. And in this way, you can let the author in this case, speak through you. So you can in turn let that other, which is probably some kind of pandemonium of voices, speak through your hands when you're writing an article. And I think pandemonium is a good word here, because it's like pandemonium means like full of demons, something like this is the etymology. So you have to let this other is not some kind of substantial other that is a one, and then you just write it down. No, it's like, and first of all, it's a neurological mess. It's a mess of demons, but there's still a simplicity to it. And the magic is to stay with the fact that you have two hands, and that the way that sentences work is that you have to say one thing at a time. So in really trying to think, that's the way I read and I write. You don't try to bring in a lot of factors, but you have to let the notion become other to itself in a simple form. Now, a very concrete example here that I absolutely love is that Zizek talks about the ambiguity of Lacanian terminology, especially the big other. Now, the big other can actually mean a lot of things. You can conceptualize it in different ways. And one of the things that you could do is to, for every different way that you conceptualize the big other, you make a different category. So you say big other 1, big other 2, big other X, big other Y. And he says this is exactly what we shouldn't do. The way I read this is that if we would do this, we would fall back into representational thinking, what Hegel calls the understanding, and it would actually be a stoppage of thinking. What we should do is let this notion, with its ambiguity, with its contradictoriness, with, I guess, the pain of that negativity which this notion entails, in so far as we don't understand it and it implies some kind of unknowing, this is how we should write about it in its simplicity and let the notion become other to itself. And this is exactly the way I'm treating love in the way I'm writing it for the Science of Logic anthology. So I'm not saying, yeah, there's eros, there's agape, there's philia, and there's all these kinds of love. I'm just saying the word love, and it could mean different things. Like it could mean friendship, family, and romantic partners. But I like the ambiguity, and the fact that love is massively ambiguous, you can pin it down with like retaining the ambiguity in one word instead of trying to make ossified, rigid distinctions. So yeah, and like I've said many times, for Hegel, love is the most immense contradiction. So that's I think a worthwhile endeavor, even though I would say that agape does have some kind of something to make a distinction between eros and agape, like political love or love in a communal sense, does have something to it. But I digress.